Welcome to the world of science fiction. Don't forget to like and subscribe so you don't miss new stories. Enjoy the listening.
James Marlowe stepped off the transport shuttle, his eyes adjusting to the vibrant hues of Epsilon Eridani b. This planet, with its sprawling metropolis and lush, alien flora, was nothing like the sterile environments he'd studied from afar. As a xenolinguist, he was here on a mission to engage with the Seraphim, the planet's native species, renowned for their advanced linguistic structures and elusive society. Walking through the bustling spaceport, James was met by Dr. Henrik Vogel, a fellow Earthling and the head of the human research outpost on the planet. Henrik's tall frame was easy to spot even in the crowded terminal. "James, welcome to Epsilon Eridani b," Henrik greeted, clapping him on the back. "You're just in time for the cultural festival. It's the perfect opportunity to meet the Seraphim." "That sounds fascinating," James replied, adjusting the strap of his bag. "I'm eager to start communication with them." As they exited the terminal, the cityscape unfolded before them. A panorama of otherworldly architecture and sky-touching towers bathed in the light of the system's binary stars. "So, the Seraphim," Henrik started as they boarded a hovering transport that would take them into the city. "They're curious about us too. Especially about human languages and social customs. Your work here could really bridge our worlds." James nodded, his mind alive with possibilities. "I hope to learn as much from them as they might from me." The transport landed in the heart of the city, where the festival was in full swing. The streets were lined with stalls showcasing exotic foods, intricate crafts, and interactive language games designed by the Seraphim. The air was filled with a symphony of sounds, from the melodious language of the Seraphim to the laughter and chatter of the crowd. As they made their way through the festival, James noticed two Seraphim who stood out from the rest. They were slightly apart from the main hustle, observing the humans with keen interest. The taller of the two, a female with luminous skin and eyes like molten silver, caught his gaze and smiled. "Let's introduce you," Henrik suggested, leading the way. "Hello," James said as they approached. "I'm James Marlowe, and this is Dr. Henrik Vogel. We're here to learn about your culture." The taller Seraphim, who introduced herself as Lyra, responded in fluid, accented English. "Welcome, James, Henrik. I am Lyra, and this is my sister, Vina. We are delighted to meet scholars such as yourselves. We have much to share and more to learn." Vina, with eyes of deep amber, added, "Your languages intrigue us. Each one seems to paint its own reality." James was impressed by their command of English. "I'm here to study your language. It's fascinating, the way it uses tonal variations and facial expressions." Lyra's face lit up. "Then you must join us for dinner tonight. We can discuss our languages more intimately." "Thank you. We'd love that," Henrik replied, exchanging a look of excitement with James. As they continued to explore the festival with Lyra and Vina, James felt a rush of anticipation. This was exactly why he'd come to this distant world. To connect, to understand, and to share. The evening promised new insights and perhaps the beginning of a significant cultural exchange. As the day faded into evening, the city lights began to twinkle, mirroring the stars above, a perfect backdrop for the unfolding dialogue between human and Seraphim. The evening air was cool as James and Henrik followed Lyra and Vina through winding streets to a quiet, upscale district of the city. The restaurant they entered was elegantly simple, with a view that overlooked the crystal skyline of Epsilon Eridani b. As they settled into their seats, a serene atmosphere enveloped the group. The table was set with an array of Seraphim delicacies, which Lyra and Vina explained in detail, sharing the cultural significance behind each dish. "Each of these dishes is prepared in a way that is meant to enhance our verbal expressions," Lyra explained, pointing to a platter with vibrant, multi-hued fruits. "For example, this fruit enhances the tonality of our speech. Try it and see if you notice a difference in your voice." Intrigued, James tasted the fruit, and to his amusement, his voice took on a melodious quality. "This is incredible," he laughed. "It's like adding a musical note to my words." Vina smiled warmly. Food and language are deeply connected in our culture. They both express and shape our perceptions. As the meal progressed, James and Henrik shared stories of Earth, and their experiences with different languages and cultures. Henrik, with his background in anthropology, discussed the societal structures and beliefs that influenced human communication. And what of love? Vina asked, her tone genuinely curious. How is love expressed in your languages? James exchanged a glance with Henrik before answering. In many human languages, love can be expressed through words, but it's often the actions, small gestures, shared moments, that truly convey it. Lyra leaned in, intrigued. Could you give us an example? Well, holding hands, for instance, James replied. It's a simple act, but it can express trust, comfort, and affection. Fascinated, Lyra extended her hand across the table. Hesitant at first, James took it, and they both smiled as a new understanding bridged the gap between their worlds. Your hands are much warmer than ours, Lyra observed, her voice a mix of wonder and delight. As are your smiles much brighter, Henrik added, making everyone laugh. After dinner, the conversation turned back to language. Vina was particularly interested in idiomatic expressions. Sometimes, the things we say don't make sense when translated directly, James explained. Like, it's raining cats and dogs. It just means it's raining very hard. But imagine how confusing that sounds in another language. Both Lyra and Vina laughed, trying to imagine such a scene. We have a similar expression, Vina said. We say, the stars are weeping, which means it's a beautiful night. As the evening wound down, the group walked back to the city center. The streets were quieter now, and the earlier excitement of the festival had given way to a peaceful night. Thank you for sharing your evening with us, James said. I feel like I've learned so much already. And we too, Lyra replied. It is rare to find such openness. We are eager to continue our exchanges. As they parted ways, Henrik nudged James. You know, I think we're on to something remarkable here. This could really change how we interact with the Seraphim. James nodded, the weight of their potential breakthrough settling in. Yeah, it's more than just an academic exercise now. It's about understanding, connecting, and maybe even changing a little bit of each other's worlds. With a final wave to Lyra and Vina, who disappeared into the night, James felt a profound sense of optimism. Tomorrow promised further discoveries, but tonight had sown the seeds of a deep and meaningful exchange. The next day, James and Henrik met early at the research outpost to discuss their strategy for continuing their cultural exchange with the Seraphim. As they prepared their notes and equipment, Dr. Marcus Lee, another linguist from Earth, joined them. His expertise in nonverbal communication was crucial for understanding the subtler aspects of Seraphim interactions. Good morning, Marcus greeted them as he walked in, carrying a stack of digital tablets. I heard about your dinner last night. Sounds like you're making great strides with Lyra and Vina. Yes, it's been an eye-opening experience, James replied. Today, we're hoping to delve deeper into their communication styles, particularly the nonverbal cues. Marcus nodded, setting up his equipment. I've brought some sensors that can help us analyze their expressions and gestures more accurately. It's fascinating how their emotions are conveyed so subtly. With their gear ready, the trio headed back to the city. They were meeting Lyra and Vina at a public garden known for its serene atmosphere, ideal for the day's sensitive discussions. Upon arriving, Lyra and Vina greeted them with a customary Seraphim gesture, a gentle touch to the heart followed by an outstretched hand. Welcome back, Lyra said, her voice reflecting her pleasure. We have been looking forward to continuing our exchange. As have we, Henrik responded, leading the way into the garden. The team set up a small, discrete array of sensors around the area where they decided to sit, ensuring that the equipment was non-intrusive. Marcus initiated the conversation, focusing on the nonverbal aspects. Could you explain how Seraphim express disagreement nonverbally? It's very different from what we're used to, Vina demonstrated, her brow slightly furrowing and her eyes narrowing in a way that was almost imperceptible. It is subtle. We value harmony, so our disagreements are often expressed just by a change in eye intensity and slight facial tensions. James, intrigued, noted the observations on his tablet. It's quite refined. Among humans, disagreements can sometimes be very overt. Laughing, Marcus added, yes, sometimes too overt. but learning your ways could help us understand how to approach sensitive topics more diplomatically. The conversation smoothly transitioned to more personal topics as they began to feel more comfortable with each other. Henrik, taking a cue from their previous discussions about human expressions of affection, decided to broach the subject of personal space and touch. In human cultures, personal space is quite important, but the boundaries vary widely. For instance, in some cultures, a hug is a common greeting among friends, Henrik explained, demonstrating a brief, friendly hug with James. Lyra watched with interest. Seraphim rarely touch outside of family or close bonds. Your openness is different, refreshing. Would you be open to a demonstration? James asked, his tone respectful. A simple handshake or a human-style greeting? After a thoughtful pause, Lyra nodded. James showed her a gentle handshake, which she mimicked perfectly, her touch light but confident. Marcus observed, "It's fascinating to see how our cultures can adapt to each other's customs. It's all about building trust, isn't it?" "Yes, trust and understanding," Vina agreed, trying the handshake with Marcus and Henrik in turn. As the afternoon waned, the group discussed more about each other's languages and customs. James found himself deeply engaged, not just professionally but personally. The connection they were building here was unlike anything he had experienced in his career. Before they parted for the day, Lyra expressed her gratitude. "Today was enlightening. We appreciate your willingness to share so openly. It helps us understand not just your language, but your people, and we appreciate your willingness to teach us," James responded warmly. "Each meeting brings us closer to a true cultural fusion." Walking back to the outpost, the men discussed the day's successes. "There's something profound happening here," Marcus mused. "It's not just an exchange of words, but of worlds." Henrik nodded in agreement. "Let's keep this momentum going. There's so much more to learn from and with each other." As the Eridani stars began to light the sky, James felt a sense of accomplishment and anticipation for the days ahead. The bridge they were building was not just of language, but of hearts and minds. As dusk settled over Epsilon Eridani B, the stars began to twinkle through the alien atmosphere, setting the stage for an evening that promised new depths of cultural and personal exploration. James, Henrik, and Marcus found themselves at a quiet observatory on the outskirts of the city, where they were meeting Lyra and Vina for a night of stargazing, an activity cherished by both humans and Seraphim for its contemplative beauty. Upon arrival, Lyra greeted them with her now familiar touch to the heart, which James and the others returned. The observatory's dome was open, revealing a vast canvas of the cosmos above, twinkling with stars and other celestial phenomena native to this part of the galaxy. "Your sky is different from ours," James remarked, gazing upwards. "But the sense of wonder it inspires feels very familiar." Vina, who was setting up a sophisticated telescope, smiled. "The stars are a source of inspiration in Seraphim culture as well. They remind us of the vastness of existence and our place within it." Henrik, always keen on integrating cultural insights with practical learning, suggested, "Perhaps we could share some of the constellations from our respective cultures? It could give us a new perspective on how we see the universe." "That's a splendid idea," Marcus chimed in, setting up a holographic projector that displayed various constellations from Earth. "Let me start with Orion, one of the most recognizable constellations viewed from Earth." As Marcus described the mythology behind Orion, Lyra and Vina listened intently, occasionally asking questions about the stories and the star's significance in human culture. After the presentation, Lyra took the lead, guiding the projector to display Seraphim constellations. "This is the Harp of Boreas," Lyra explained, pointing to a cluster of stars that formed a delicate, harp-like shape. "It symbolizes communication and harmony in our society. Each string represents a voice within the community, contributing to the collective melody of thoughts and emotions." James found the symbolism beautiful and profound. "It's amazing how both our cultures have looked to the stars for meaning, even though we are light years apart." The night progressed with more exchanges of star stories and cultural metaphors, deepening their mutual understanding. At one point, Henrik proposed an experiment in language and perception. "Let's describe what we see in the sky without using scientific terms," Henrik suggested. purely through the emotions or thoughts the stars evoke. Vina eagerly went first, her eyes scanning the heavens. When I look up, I see the echoes of light dancing across time, each pulse a beat of the universe's heart. Marcus followed, inspired by Vina's poetic description. I see a tapestry woven from threads of light, each star a knot holding together the fabric of space and time. The exercise sparked a series of evocative descriptions, with each participant contributing their unique perspective, influenced by their cultural backgrounds and personal experiences. As the night drew to a close, James felt a profound connection not just to his colleagues and their seraphim friends, but to the universe itself. Tonight was more than just sharing knowledge. It was about sharing how we feel, how we connect with the universe, he reflected. Lyra agreed, her voice soft yet full of emotion. Yes, and through your eyes, we see the stars anew. It's a gift, a new way to perceive our own sky. They all agreed to make these stargazing sessions a regular part of their cultural exchange. As they packed up their equipment, Henrik looked around at the group, his face lit by the soft glow of the observatory lights. This is just the beginning, he said. Each night we spend under the stars, we weave our stories and perspectives into a richer understanding of each other. Walking back to their transport, the men discussed plans for their next meeting, energized by the night's revelations and the promise of further discoveries. The stars above, once mere points of light, now held stories and meanings shared across worlds, bridging human and seraphim cultures in the quiet majesty of the night sky. As the cultural exchange deepened, so did the friendships among the group. However, the next meeting took an unexpected turn when Vina appeared visibly troubled. They had gathered at a serene park in the city, a place chosen for its calm and beauty, where human and seraphim artists often came to seek inspiration. James noticed Vina's distraction first. Vina, you seem distant today. Is everything all right? He asked, concerned, as they settled under the shade of a towering xenoblossom tree. Vina hesitated, then sighed, her voice low. I find myself overwhelmed. The depth of your emotions and the ways you express them, it's so different from us. I feel lost, sometimes. Henrik, always sensitive to the nuances of intercultural relations, joined the conversation. It's a lot to take in, isn't it? Learning about another world, another way of feeling and being. It can be daunting. Marcus added supportively, it's okay to feel this way. It's part of learning and growing. Maybe we can help bridge that gap. What specifically feels overwhelming? It's your concept of love and intimacy, Vina confessed. It's so expressive, so physical. Seraphim connections are more reserved, more spiritual. James leaned forward, choosing his words carefully. It's interesting because to us, those expressions are a vital part of building and showing trust. Perhaps, if you're comfortable, we could explore these concepts together, find common ground. Vina nodded, her interest piqued despite her apprehension. Yes, I'd like that. I want to understand, even if it feels strange to me. Encouraged by her willingness, Henrik proposed an idea. Let's take a walk around the park. It's a human custom to walk and talk, to share thoughts freely in nature. It might help us discuss this more comfortably. As they strolled through the lush pathways of the park, they observed various artists at work, capturing the natural beauty of the environment in different media. Marcus pointed to a human artist painting broad, emotional strokes on a canvas. See how the artist uses colors and shapes to express feelings. It's similar to how we use words and gestures. Vina watched intently, then turned to a seraphim sculptor working with light and shadows. We use light to reveal and conceal, to show our emotions in a subtler form. Maybe understanding these methods can help me grasp your more direct expressions. That's a brilliant insight, James remarked. Art could be a bridge for us. Just as these artists share their inner worlds through their creations, we can share ours through our interactions. Feeling inspired, Vina suggested, could we try something? Could I attempt to express what I've learned from you through a seraphim art form? Everyone agreed enthusiastically, and they returned to the observatory, where materials for seraphim light sculpting were available. Under Vina's guidance, they each attempted to create a light sculpture that represented their feelings about the cultural exchange. James attempted a sculpture that used vibrant pulses of light to represent laughter and warmth, while Henrik's used a gradient of light to symbolize the depth of their conversations. Marcus created a piece with interwoven light strands, symbolizing the interconnected nature of their relationships. Vina, moved by their efforts, created a piece that combined elements from all their sculptures, showing how she was integrating their expressions into her understanding. As they viewed the completed pieces, Vina felt a breakthrough. I think I'm beginning to see your forms of expression, your art, and your affection. They're different, but not so alien to me now. James smiled, pleased with the progress. It's about finding that common language, isn't it? Whether it's through words, art, or even silence. As the day ended, Vina felt a newfound appreciation for human expressions of emotion. Though still a novice in understanding them fully, she was no longer daunted but excited to continue exploring. Walking back, Marcus summed up the day's lesson. Today wasn't just about bridging cultural gaps. It was about embracing them, learning to see the beauty in our differences. The group parted ways with a sense of accomplishment, knowing each meeting brought them closer not only to understanding each other's worlds, but to enriching their own. The following evening, James, Henrik, and Marcus gathered at a quiet cafe in the heart of the Seraphim capital. Their recent sessions had led to remarkable discoveries, but Vina's struggle with understanding human concepts of love and intimacy had stayed with them. Tonight, the three of them planned to delve deeper into this cultural difference and find a way to make Vina feel more at ease. As they settled around a circular table, James ordered a round of warm, lightly spiced tea, a Seraphim specialty. It's interesting, he began, stirring his drink. We've spent so much time learning about the Seraphim, but it's clear that the emotional nuances between our cultures are where the real challenges lie. Henrik nodded. It's the invisible barriers, how we interpret love, closeness, even friendship. Vina's clearly struggling with those ideas because they're so different from what she knows. Marcus sipped his tea thoughtfully. Maybe it's time we invite her to share her view of love and relationships. We've been open with ours, but perhaps we haven't given her enough room to help us see it from her side. Their conversation was interrupted when Vina arrived, her expression calm but reflective. She joined them, offering a polite nod. Thank you for meeting with me. I wanted to continue our conversation, if you're open to it. Of course, James replied, gesturing to the seat beside him. We were just discussing how we might bridge the gaps in our understanding. Vina settled in, wrapping her slender fingers around her cup as if drawing comfort from its warmth. I've been reflecting on our recent discussions. Your ideas of love, connection, and physical closeness. They're so tangible, so outwardly expressed. Among my people, love is less about gestures and more about presence, shared silence, or simply knowing. Henrik leaned forward, intrigued. That's beautiful. We often forget that connection doesn't always need physical touch or spoken words. Vina looked at each of them, her expression thoughtful. I think I felt overwhelmed because, in Seraphim culture, love is sensed more than it is shown. We bond deeply, but we rarely show it through touch or outward displays. Could you help us understand what that's like? Marcus asked gently. How would two Seraphim who are close express that bond? Vina considered this for a moment. Through gestures that are subtle. A lingering look, a shared memory brought up at just the right time. Or creating something together, like a piece of art. It's often about conveying a feeling without words or actions. James nodded. That's almost like a silent language. It's a form of intimacy that's internal, less about showing and more about sensing. Encouraged, Vina continued, her voice soft but steady. Exactly. And while I admire your openness, I find it challenging to reconcile with the way I was taught to experience closeness. Henrik tapped his fingers thoughtfully on the table. What if we tried an exercise in presence? Something where we can practice being in each other's company without words or physical gestures, just focusing on what we feel in each other's presence. Vina's face brightened at the idea. That sounds more comfortable, yes? A space where we can simply be. They agreed to meet the following day at a tranquil garden near the outskirts of the city. As the sun set, casting a warm glow over the landscape, the The group arrived and chose a quiet area surrounded by blossoming trees and soft grass. They sat together in a circle, and for a while, there was no sound except the gentle rustling of leaves. The quiet was serene, a silence filled with a sense of mutual understanding rather than emptiness. After several minutes, James broke the silence, his voice low and contemplative. "It's calming, isn't it? Just being here, together, without the need to speak or explain." Vina nodded slowly, her gaze fixed on the soft light filtering through the trees. "I feel your presence in a way I hadn't before. It's different from seraphim bonds, but comforting." Marcus smiled, sensing the impact this exercise had on her. Sometimes silence says more than words. It can convey a sense of trust, of just being open. Henrik, observing the effect this had on Vina, added, "Maybe that's the common ground between us. In your culture, silence is a form of connection, just as our physical gestures and words are." Vina glanced at each of them, her expression one of understanding. "You're right. I've realized that different as they are, both methods are ways of expressing care and trust. They're different paths to the same feeling." As they sat there, the silence between them grew even richer, a shared presence that needed no words. Vina seemed to relax, her body language softening as she grew more comfortable with the newfound understanding. When they eventually spoke again, it was with a deeper respect for each other's worlds. Vina looked at each of them in turn, her gaze warm. "Thank you for helping me understand this. I feel closer to all of you." James replied gently, "We feel the same, Vina. This journey is about learning, and I think we've all gained a lot today." They left the garden with a sense of peace, knowing they'd found a way to bridge their cultural differences. It wasn't through grand gestures or profound revelations, but through the quiet act of just being present, of respecting the silent depths of each other's worlds. Walking back together under the starry sky, they felt that they had taken a significant step forward. This experience had shown them that understanding sometimes lies in simplicity, in shared moments of silence that bring souls closer, even without words. James, Henrik, and Marcus arrived at the Seraphim Ceremonial Hall at dusk, invited by Lyra and Vina to participate in a ritual that was said to celebrate unity and connection. The men were unsure what to expect, but the invitation alone felt significant, a gesture of trust and openness that extended beyond language. As they entered, they were greeted by the soft glow of bioluminescent lights lining the hall. The space had a natural elegance, with smooth, translucent walls that shimmered softly, casting warm hues throughout. Lyra approached, greeting them with a serene smile. "Welcome. Tonight, we will share a custom dear to our people. It's called the Union of Essence." Henrik tilted his head, intrigued. "What does it involve?" Vina, who joined them with a gentle nod, explained, "It's a ceremony of presence and shared energy. No words, no physical contact, only the silent exchange of thoughts and feelings. We open ourselves to each other fully." James looked at his colleagues, their expressions mirroring his own curiosity. "It sounds beautiful. We're honored to be included." Lyra gestured toward the center of the hall, where cushions were arranged in a circle. "Please, sit with us." They took their places, seated in a circle with Lyra and Vina across from them. A soft hum filled the air, and Lyra closed her eyes, breathing slowly, as if attuning herself to an inner rhythm. Following her lead, Henrik and Marcus closed their eyes, while James focused on clearing his mind. The silence grew thick, charged with an unusual intensity. Though they were not touching, he felt the unmistakable presence of each person in the circle. After a few moments, James began to sense something beyond his usual awareness, a quiet, steady pulse that seemed to radiate warmth. It was as if each of them were attuned to a shared heartbeat, a rhythm that united them without a single spoken word. Henrik broke the silence, his voice barely a whisper. "This feeling, it's profound, almost like being in the presence of each other's thoughts." Lyra opened her eyes, smiling softly. "Yes, this is the essence of our unity ritual. It allows us to feel connected, to see each other beyond words or appearances." Marcus nodded, clearly moved. "There's an honesty to this. It's as if we're more ourselves here than we are outside. Vina looked around the circle, her gaze soft but direct. This is how we experience true closeness, as if we can feel each other's essence. We've been taught that unity is not in the physical, but in the presence we share. James felt a warmth spreading through him, an understanding of what connection could be beyond words or actions. Thank you for sharing this with us. I think I finally understand how connection feels in your culture. As the ritual came to a close, they rose slowly, feeling a bond that went beyond the night, beyond the ritual. Walking back through the quiet streets together, they knew that in this shared silence, something transformative had passed between them, binding their worlds with a new understanding. As dawn painted the sky over Epsilon Eridani B with hues of violet and amber, James, Henrik, and Marcus met Lyra and Vina atop a hill overlooking the city. The horizon stretched endlessly, and the quietness of the morning seemed to echo the newfound harmony among them. "This view never gets old," James said, breaking the early silence, his eyes on the twin suns beginning to rise. "It feels like a good place to reflect." Lyra smiled softly. "We thought you'd appreciate it. This place holds significance for our people. A spot to greet the new day with openness." Marcus adjusted his gaze to Lyra and Vina. "These last few weeks have been incredible. I never imagined we'd come so far in understanding each other, especially in ways that go beyond language." Henrik nodded, adding, "And I think the most surprising part was realizing that connection isn't about bridging gaps with words or gestures. It's about sharing the silence, the presence, something I hadn't fully appreciated before." Vina looked thoughtful. "For us, your openness with your emotions, your words, it was initially overwhelming. But in that openness, we found a depth we hadn't known. You showed us another way of being close." Lyra turned to James, her expression warm. "We may have begun as students of language, but now, it feels we've become something more, friends, connected souls. This journey taught us that our differences create new ways of understanding." James glanced at Henrik and Marcus, who shared the same sentiment in their expressions. "It's true. We started off studying each other as cultural representatives, but somewhere along the line, we began sharing as people. We may come from different worlds, but I feel we're connected now in ways that words can't define." Vina looked out over the city, her voice contemplative. "Then perhaps that is the gift of this exchange. We learned to see beyond words, to feel beyond gestures, and to know each other beyond appearances." As they watched the sun's light spill across the alien landscape, Henrik took a deep breath, letting the morning air fill him with a sense of quiet peace. "I think this is only the beginning, not just for us, but for our peoples. We've shown that understanding is possible, and maybe even something lasting." Lyra smiled, nodding. "Our cultures may have different ways of expressing love, friendship, and connection, but the essence is the same. We're all seeking to belong, to be seen, and to share the beauty of our worlds." The group fell silent, letting the moment sink in. The morning's calm wrapped around them like a shared memory in the making, binding their shared experiences into something real and enduring. As they began the descent back to the city, James glanced over at Vina, who looked at him with a new warmth, a quiet understanding in her eyes. They didn't need words to know what they had accomplished. "Shall we meet again here, same time tomorrow?" Marcus suggested, a smile lighting up his face. Lyra and Vina nodded, almost in unison, their eyes shining with unspoken promises. "Yes," Lyra replied. "Let's greet many more dawns together." And with that, they walked into the morning, knowing they had become part of each other's worlds, no longer just visitors but friends bound by shared moments, silent and spoken alike.